Hey guys, what's up and welcome back. We've swapped into the HotA build. I've been trying pretty hard to make some interesting content for HotA, and it's not that straightforward because it's a well-known build. The synergies are kind of like really well documented because it's an S tier build, and also, it's iterated on over a period of time where I haven't really been playing it, right? So I'm only just kind of playing it here at the end of the launch version of the game, but there's definitely at least one thing that's, to me, extremely interesting about this version of the game that's going to be completely lost in the upcoming version of the game, and that is resource management and the resource management calculation, right? So resource generation. And essentially, this build does an incredible job of multiplying your fury gained. And I just want to talk about this real quick, right? So resource generation works just like damage multipliers do, in that you take the percent and you convert it to a multiplier, right? So these are the stats on my gear. Banished Lord Talisman giving me 13.8% resource generation. Ring of Red Fury giving 23.3%, which is a very nice roll on that. The other ring has 16.9%. And then when you hit the Rallying Cry button, you get 40%. They either call it resource generation or fury generation. It's the same stat. So Rallying Cry gives you 40% resource generation, plus the modifier Tactical Rallying Cry gives you another 20%. These are technically coming from the same source, so you add them together and it's its own 1.6 multiplier. And then while Berserking, Prolific Fury, the passive, is giving 18% resource generation. Wrath of the Berserker, when active, is giving 30% resource generation. And then HotA itself has that second modifier that's giving 3% per stack, up to 10 stacks, which is 30% resource generation. So basically, you take all those percents, convert them into multipliers, and then just take the product, so like multiply them, right? And then we did a little rounding to the third decimal point because that's what it holds. And then the way that you turn that into a multiplicative percent is basically the same. Like, take the multiplier. So, like, to get to the total multiplicative percent, take the multipliers, do the conversion, do the calculation to get the multiplier percent, and then convert that back into a percent by minusing 1 and timesing by 100, basically, right? So it's like the opposite of how you get from percent to a multiplier. You create the multiplier, and then you take it back to a percent. So basically what this means is anytime we're generating fury, in the other build it would be like Echoing Fury, 10 fury per second. If we had Echoing Fury on, this would be giving 52 fury per second, right? And HotA works a little differently in that the fury generating skill outside of Tybalt's Will, right? So Tybalt's Will and Rallying Cry are giving us our initial fury boost, right? So Rallying Cry gives 20 fury, and then Tybalt's Will gives 50 when we become unstoppable, right? And that'll be times probably by like the initial... I got to assume that it's only going to be times the 1.6 when the Rallying Cry button is hit. Like, even if I hit Rallying Cry and War Cry at the same time, am I getting the benefit from Prolific Fury? I'm not quite sure. And then Wrath of the Berserker as well, right, with its 1.3. So I got to assume that that initial burst of Fury is just getting the Rallying Cry 1.6 multiplier. So that's 70 times 1.6 essentially, which is what we would be starting out with. Which is, let's see if we can actually figure that out. So 70 times 1.6, probably starting out with like 112 fury at the start of any activity, right? And then the training dummy doesn't quite work right with Unrelenting Fury. Even if I switch to the training dummy, that's the boss version, it's not giving the refund. But essentially what's happening here is, if we think about this 30% refund times the 70% for HotA, or the 70 fury for HotA that it costs, right? That's basically saying, okay, 70 fury times 0.3, which would be 21 fury return per HotA swing. Well, that is actually times the multiplier, which is the 5.23, I'll put this back over here, right? So this is 70 times 0.3, which is the refund that we're getting when we're either hitting bosses or killing things, 21. But that 21 gets multiplied by our Fury generation multiplier, and it's giving us 110, say, rounded up Fury per hit of HotA, which means we're spending 70 and we're gaining back 110 if all of our resource generation effects are active, right? So it's basically unlimited HotAing while we have enough resource generation to make it so that Unrelenting Fury gives us a refund of 70 or greater, basically, right? And that's pretty cool. That's the play style. The normal setup is to have Earth Strikers and Ancestral Force to go along with Limitless Rage and Edge Masters. The armor is all the same. Tuskhelm, Juggernauts, Relentless Berserkers, Tybalt's Will, and Ghostwalkers. And then the jewelry is setting up the combo. So Banish Lord Talisman plus Ring of Red Fury is setting up guaranteed critical overpowers. And then Unrelenting Fury is the Fury generation engine that's giving us a ton of Fury back with every single HotA based on our resource generation percent. And then the build is scaled with damage while berserking with the Blood Rage node, just like the other builds. It's scaled off of Max Fury because of the way HotA works. HotA deals an additional 1% additional damage for each point of Fury you had when casting it, which means that Elixir of Resourcefulness can basically read plus 50% damage to HotA. So we take that, and our Max Fury goes up to 251, right? We don't have the 30 Max Fury from Ramaladini's, which is unfortunate, but we have every other place that we can get it. So it's on the helm, it's on the pants, it's on the 2 rings, and then it's not on Amulet, but this Amulet has resource generation, which Amulets normally wouldn't. And then Ring of Red Fury, the resource generation roll, the max roll there is basically kind of like a greater affix. It's 1.5. It's a 1.5 multiplier. It's 50% better than resource generation on Ring, essentially. The 18.5, the 27.4 max is 50% higher than that, right? So let's hop into a tier level 100 Nightmare Dungeon. We've got Doombringer equipped because Overpower also scales with max life, and the survivability in the dungeons is good. We've got 14,000 armor, which is over the current armor cap of 1325. And then our resistances are all good. And then if we want to really be anal and cap resistances, we could use an incense that will cap the cold resistance and 2 other resistances, right? So we can show how that works real quick. And then we'll run the dungeon. I've got other videos of me doing big boss bonks, but I don't know. I'm only really interested in discussing the mechanics and trying to make videos that are interesting from the perspective of how the builds work, right? Without doing like a full-blown build guide. Okay, so the incense lets us overcap our resistances by 2%, and then an elixir would let us overcap our resistances by 6%, right? But that's basically the maximum amount of armor we can have. We have armor over the cap. We have resistances capped out. And then everything else is basically like our damage reduction, right? So we've got damage reduction on chest. There's damage reduction close on these pants. There's a lot of damage reduction while berserking thanks to the Tuskhelm. That's 7 ranks of aggressive resistance gives 28% damage reduction while berserking. And then we've got DR while fortified as well. But we don't have the additional DR while fortified on the skill tree, but that would be an option. And then we're doing our life gain through Invigorating Fury. Spending resource is activating Supreme Wrath of the Berserker, Invigorating Fury, and Warbringer for Fortify generation. So yeah, it's a really synergistic build. It's really well thought out. And it's not as fun to play as Whirlwind, but it's very, very strong. It can one-shot the bosses. It can combo kill like Duriel and Uber Lilith. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. Oh, I wasn't paying attention at all because I wanted to bring up my stats. Oh, you know what I wasn't paying attention to? This one has Death Pulse. Yeah, that was a bad start, but I gotta do... I usually skip Death Pulse dungeons, so you gotta do a little gameplay adjustment to make sure that you're avoiding the... constantly moving. So let's just wait until we get all of our effects up, and then we'll look at our resource generation percent, and it should show as the 423. Alright, so we want to get 10 kills though, so let's lure these guys over. Okay, I'll see if we can take a quick look at our stats and mats. Maybe we need to play with stats and mats open. We can try that. Alright, so Fury generation by default is 61.4%. $302. It's pretty hard to get it live in the action because I want it with all my effects up, but that was pretty close. We need to try... We're trying to get to the 423.4 number. And basically we're trying to walk into a room that has enough monsters where we can get 10 HotA stacks. Okay, this is good. Alright, stats and mats. Nope, damn it. I guess I didn't need to experiment with this against the hardest monsters. That probably would have been a better idea. But the training dummy doesn't help with what I'm trying to do. Alright, so we got 5 seconds of the stacking, so let's just try and get the stacks. Okay, and then... No, damn it. Definitely very stupid to do this against the high-level mobs. But now I'm pot committed. But basically our Fury is always at cap. And then we just need to avoid the death pulses. Okay, Wrath of the Berserker's coming back online. Here we go. $423.4. Perfect. So that was pretty sloppy, but that's basically what we're talking about, is all of the sources of resource generation equal 423.4%, which gives us a 5.23 multiplier, which when all that's active, every HotA gives us 110 Fury, which is plus plus 40 basically. And in the new version of the game, that's going to basically be become obsoleted by the fact that a type of roll that you can get is going to be resource per second, right? And that's going to change the game completely. So in Diablo 3, you had, for Barbarian, you had the two-piece set with the Bolcathos. I forget what it was. It was like the two-piece Bolcathos swords that had resource generation on them as well, right? So that basically completely changed the game when you got that, and you would basically start out encounters with your Fury capped. And you can imagine with the way that things like Limitless Rage and Numbing Wrath work, the effects that are asking you to get over the Fury cap, right? All of those effects are going to be so much easier to achieve now. And stuff like we're doing here, where we have to solve for our Fury generation, is going to become a lot simpler. And that's what I like about this current version of the build, is it's doing a lot to solve for the Fury generation problem. Tybalt's Will is giving you a lot of burst with the way that the skill bar is set up. And then this build has, because of HotA's modifier and because of using Banished Lord Talisman, this build just has a ton of Fury generation. So this is an example where I don't really mind the gameplay adjustment that the Death Pulse is making you do. It's kind of like encouraging you to hit and run a little bit. This build crushes the Butcher if you run into him. So basically the hardest monster in the game, which is the level 154 Butcher, absolutely gets wrecked by this. You can one-shot Uber Lilith, but then you still have to fight her Phase 2 mechanics. So it's not totally free. You can combo kill the world bosses pretty easily with Earth Strikers. If you have borrowed power from seasons, you can definitely one-shot the world bosses without any special setups. But the way that we would do it is setting up like a few overpowers in a row. We do that same setup against Duriel, we do that same setup against Lilith. The gameplay is just really smooth with this setup. Yep. I'm down to my last revive? Okay, no problem. The other thing that's going to change drastically in the upcoming version of the game is loot gets a little better, but also becomes trivialized in a sense, where the motivation for doing the level 100 Nightmare dungeons is the amount of 925 gear that you get in the level 100 Nightmare dungeon. Like, all of the yellow drops are basically always going to be guaranteed to be 925. And then same with, like, any of the uniques or legendaries you get. Duriel still kind of has the best drops, because if it's, like, a legendary with a X% on it, you're basically getting the full range from the 925, but then also you're also getting like a high probability of having the max ranged roll anyway out of that. So yeah, Duriel as a source of loot is really good, but the level 925 Nightmare dungeons are either the first best or second best place to get loot. These events are chaotic as hell because of the Death Pulse explosions. For gameplay, we just hold down right click and then use left click. So we're basically holding down right click to, or left click to move and right click to HotA. We can use shift if we need to throw out HotAs while we're standing still, but it's kind of just better to have the target. You get tons of loot, obviously. You get tons of sigils. Like, this is how good the loot is. Like, max life CDR, nope, it's garbage. Max life total armor, good rolls, garbage. All the 925 weapons. And 925 weapons, it's very easy to get the rolls that you want on weapons. In the new version of the game, any monster that's 95 plus is guaranteed to drop a 925 item. So, like this one for example, strength, overpower damage, damage while berserking, or core skill damage. Like, that's a good sword. That could be... the problem is, if I was playing overpower, I would want a mace instead. So, even though the stats are good, the implicit is incorrect. Just a completely full bag of yellows. Convert it all to crystal. We don't really need the money. Okay, so let's see if we can get out of here without dying. Alright, we gotta find the other stone. Just smashing stuff. Okay, it's either like over here or in that other corridor. We're just being cautious of the death pulses. We'll save Wrath of the Berserker for the boss fight. Okay, should be a boss door behind this, hopefully. Or at least a run to the boss. Yeah, exactly. It's just a... Oh, and we're invulnerable. Perfect. Should just be a walk to the boss door, which should just be right here. Yep. Okay, and then what we can do is we can set up a guaranteed overpower. So let's go... Alright, so now our next hit's guaranteed to overpower. It'll just throw up all our buffs. And that's how you stomp out the harder bosses. We had we let off with an overpower, but it wasn't a critical overpower. Almost done getting all our glyphs to 15. We're working on the ones that we have equipped first, which are... Might, I guess, is the last one that we need to worry about. And then we'll start leveling up some of the other ones. Get all the rest of them... Basically get Might to 21, all the rest of these to 15, all of these to 4, and then finish getting all these to 21. And that's basically it. Our build is definitely ready for the switch to the Season 4 mechanics, even in Internal Realm. We can play this guy to get us the better gear and the mats that we need. Basically, this guy can survive in the Helltide as is. He'll be able to kill the threat level enemies in the Helltide, which is what we need. So, yeah. I really wanted to just go over the Fury generation portion of the build. To me, that's the most interesting. The build is basically scaling off of Overpower, Max Fury, and Damage Wall Berserking, and it's taking any effects that multiply damage for core skills or skill damage in general, like Edge Master's Limitless Rage, Unbridled Rage, the HotA modifiers, and then Ancestral Force to give HotA bigger AoE. That's basically all there is to it. You could also throw Ancestral Charge in there and do more of like a Charge HotA hybrid, which a lot of people like to do. I'm pretty happy with this version of the build, and then especially running Doombringer for the harder content. So, yeah. That basically wraps up everything that we're going to do for the preparation for itemization changes. We can get to Uber Lilith Phase 2 no problem, either with the Whirlwind build or with the HotA build. With Whirlwind, we can do Lilith's Stage 1 mechanics, and with HotA, we can just one-shot her, and then we haven't been able to dodge the bullet hell in the Phase 2 yet, so we'll get there eventually, maybe not before the season launch, but it doesn't really matter. All right, thanks guys, take care.